Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Today's EVE Talk is coming to you guys from a Jita Under Siege, as Burn Jita has once again started, where the Imperium will have amassed quite a few destroyers and other gank capable ships in order to disrupt and try to completely halt any transport to and from Jita. I haven't really been able to follow things up all that closely. I've been very busy, but I do know that it's happening right now. And yeah, lots of explosions, lots of tie-dye as well from Marky Dragon's stream. So very cool to come and take a look at it, of course, but try to find the right places so that you don't have to slug through too much tie-dyes. Anyway, we are here for the market, of course, and as always, we are going to start with some plex and stuff, and that's going to be at 55 seconds. Like that. On the chart we can see a nice little dip here for plex. We can also see a big volume increase. Pretty obvious pattern that this is a sale by CCP. This does mean that we are getting pretty close to 3 million ISK now for the sellers of plex buyers at 3,011,000 ISK. In Jita itself, if we take out the filter, not a big difference, 3,068,000 ISK. It's actually a first. The cheapest sell order is actually in Jita Station at the moment, and pretty much the same thing here for the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs. So nice little dip. It is due to CCP intervening. What I'm curious about is apparently at the moment, you know, in the last couple of days, we're maintaining this current trade range, which is strange. I thought we would go up a little bit more quickly. That is not happening at the moment. What do the multiple pilot train certificate look like? This is of course a much more dramatic drop from a visual standpoint. It is from 1.3 billion to almost 1 billion on the chart. Again, you can see the massive increase in volumes because of CCP's sale, and these are now down to 1.1 billion pretty much for the sellers and around 1 billion for the buyers. Definitely a nice opportunity if you're looking to train a second character on an account to grab this relatively cheaply, a month's trading's worth from these items. Very massive drop, and I think basically in percentage it's definitely a lot more than plex themselves, because these have gone from maybe 3.2 million to 3 million, while these multiple part trading certificates from 1.3 billion to around 1 billion is quite a sharp drop, like probably a quarter or something like that. Next up, we've got the skill extractors. Same thing. What I'm a bit surprised by is we don't see the massive volume push here. There's a little bit of increased volume, but not by that much. And we're actually on a slight uptick here from 370 million to the current 355 million for the sellers, 338 million for the buyers. So this is all CCP sale movements that we're seeing here, and a little more muted, a smaller drop from skill extractors, which is a little bit weird. Now the impact of all of that on the injectors could be interesting. So here is the large skill injector, and yet again it is a small drop. It's not that much. So let's take this high point here, around 810 million ISK, currently selling for 805 million ISK, buyers at 791, 792 almost. This again indicates that the plex movement, the sale showed actually the biggest change on the pilot training certificates, which are like a very expensive item. Next up, percentage-wise, probably plex themselves, a little bit less in skill extractors, and finally even less in the skill injectors. So there is this component in the injectors that is of course the demand for skill points that can work both ways. I've always seen that as potentially a nice little potential for increased volatility if CCP would come out with something where a large majority of the player base would want those skills as quickly as possible due to a change or a new ship or something like that. I always saw that as a great opportunity to sell at that point, but here we're also seeing that there can be a stabilization factor in these items as well. Let's take a look at the small scale injector next. Pretty much the same thing, right? We were on an uptick that's basically been undone here. Let's start these out at around 160 million, currently selling for 161.5. Hardly any movement there. 157 million for the buyers. Very narrow margins in all of these items, in plex and in all the extractors and injectors on the market at the moment. And then finally we also have the daily alpha injector that really isn't moving much. It's finding its price at around 60 million, and that's about it. 60 million for the sellers, 57 million almost for the buyers. Again, that very narrow margin. So from this perspective, it is of course quite normal. You have the special plex vault. There is really no reason for anyone to be losing plex during a burn Jita or anything like that. The whole effect has been a sale from CCP. Next up, let's take a look at the minerals. That might be a little bit different at 540. There we go. Let's start out with titanium that is continuing its descent and just breaking straight through 5 ISK on its way down. Not really nice to see if you're a miner. In the last few hours, I actually prepared the ticker a little bit beforehand, and you know, it just became too late for me to do ETH talk before downtime. That's the reason why we'll see probably a little bit of difference between the actual numbers and the numbers on the ticker. But titanium, the sellers dipping below 5 ISK at 497, the buyers are coming in at 472, keeping that margin pretty large actually, and basically pulling the price down. But it's also a little bit worrying. 1.4 billion, 1.4 billion, 2 billion, another billion. It's a lot of titanium coming to the market, which it cannot absorb at the moment. So we are back, and pretty soon I think we'll be playing with that 4.5 ISK trade range if we're not careful, or if nothing really happens that might disrupt all of this. I just don't think that burn Jita is going to do that much for the mineral market either, unfortunately. Next up, we've got pyrite bouncing around the 4.5 ISK mark, but still clearly under pressure even at the tail end. Currently selling for 4.28 ISK, extremely cheap pyrite. 424 for the first buyer though, so here the margin has closed. We're basically bouncing around a current bottom, but be careful. We thought maybe the last time staying above 4.5 ISK was definitely possible, because we managed to do that throughout the whole year. A little bit of an uptick during some 0-0 activity, and now we just crashed straight through that, and we're at an even lower bottom. How low can we go? Well, pretty damn low it seems. Next up, we've got Macharial, which should be doing okay, and alright, actually trying to climb its way back to 75 ISK. Very good news for the high-sec miners then. Again, focus on sources for Macharial if you are mining in high-sec. 75.57 ISK for the sellers, 72.61 for the buyers though. Pretty wide margin. The buyers want those cheap minerals. Nobody's really willing to pay top dollar for them at the moment, but it's good to see that we're staying around the average price, 70 to 75 ISK for Macharial, and that the bottom is not dropping out of this market, because that would really reduce the efficiency, the ISK per hour that high-sec miners could achieve. Next up, we've got Isogen, and that is actually terrible news. We're continuing this descent straight from 40 to 35 ISK, and we're actually apparently breaking that on the low point on even more supply, which is pretty damn crazy. 33.57 for the sellers, 32.19 for the buyers, and I would not be surprised that we'd play with 30 ISK pretty soon here if this continues. So not great. Isogen market really at a 1-year low point, at an all-time low point. I don't think we've ever seen Isogen this low, and a crazy time. But always remember now that risk of, you know what, I'm just gonna start buying lots of Isogen at this price point. You could have thought the same thing at 40 ISK, and there you'd now be with all of that Isogen only being worth 35. So if you do want to start to invest in the minerals, my personal tactic is to just bring some compressed ores that I mine myself here. I'm not purchasing all that much at the moment, but on this movement here you could definitely decide on a small purchase, but don't go crazy. Don't put all your ISK in Isogen at the moment, because as we've seen, you could have seen the same pattern at 40 ISK and you'd still have been too early. It remains a bit of a risk. Noxium next, going to Going straight back to the 300 to 325 range, not at the 1 year low point just yet though. So basically holding on to that new trade range that is still above 300 ISK. So 310 for the sellers, 306 for the buyers, narrowing margin again here. Looks like the market is willing to keep Noxium above 300 for now. Next up we've got Zydrine that is yet again playing with a 1 year low, breaking through the 800 ISK mark. 764 for the sellers, 727 for the buyers, and I personally fear that this might be due to moon mining, more sources of Zydrine, more potential miners that have now gotten the opportunity to mine for Zydrine, which is all miners in 0.5 systems. Before that, you know, if you decide to mine there, you're probably not very likely to just make the jump to 0.0, and as a result, that's potentially a lot more supply here. We can also see the increased volumes and 1 year low point for Zydrine as well, which all of this is going to dampen a lot of production as well. Let's take a look at the Megasite chart next, bouncing off of that year low point of 875 pretty much, currently selling for 961, a little bit of a comeback, heading towards 1000 ISK yet again, and then 931 for the buyers. It's still pretty cheap though compared to the rest of the 1 year chart, and here again what I do notice is a slight uptick in volumes, so potentially we do have more and more sources of these bringing Megasite to the market somehow. Next up we've got a Morphite, the final mineral Tech 2 related, holding strong at 10,000 ISK, so I would say a little bit too late to sell, right? 11 to 12,000 ISK would have been a good sale if you purchased below 9,000, but if you're looking to make the investment again, sellers at 9,900, buyers at 9,400, I would wait for a buy price at least of less than 9,000 ISK before trying to restock on Morphite here. It's right in the middle of the entire chart, so in between the two. Next up we've got our PI at 12 minutes. There we go. Let's take a look at the broadcast nodes. This is pretty interesting to me, staying at 2.25 million ISK, where normally it moves between 2 to 2.25 million ISK. So we're still paying that premium because of the introduction of all the new mineable moons, probably especially in HiSec, but potentially also in wormhole space, where this gives you a lot more options. I've lived in a C1 wormhole for a little bit and actually tried to build stuff there, but the ore sites there are definitely not very reoccurring. You can't count on them. So maybe in bigger wormholes you can sometimes argue that going for an Orca or Orcal would make sense, but in those small wormholes it really felt like that would just be a waste of time. If you can put up some moon refineries there and get a steady supply of all of those minerals, it probably makes a lot more sense. So 2.25 million for the sellers, 2.2 million almost for the buyers. You're still paying the premium due to all of the current demand for new refineries. Construction blocks, oh, that's a nice little spike right here. So we had an opportunity to buy at 11,500 ISK. We're currently selling them for 13,000 ISK. Not bad, a little bit of profit. Buyers forced up as well to 12,500 ISK. We are obviously a little bit above average at this point for construction blocks. Good to see something that is generally, I would say, considered a decently stable PI material to show some volatility. Consumer electronics next, continuing on its strength, currently 15,000 ISK, 15,500 to even 16,000 for the first few sellers, 14,000 for the buyers. Decently wide margin. I think that the buyers are starting to basically give the attempt of pulling down the price, but if sellers continue to be careful with the volumes that they bring in here, they can still command that premium, which is pretty massive, right? Buying for 14,000, selling for 16,000, that almost makes sense to do the trade. So one of the two sides is winning out. It's obviously the sellers at the moment, if you look at the chart well above 15,000 ISK on average at the moment. So consumer electronics still building on that strength, almost 2 months now. It would, I think, have made sense to switch some planets to that. especially if we look at coolants here. Fuel related PI, which is something that I make for instance on Gas Planet, still staying below 9,000 ISK here. Really not great. 8,700 for the sellers, 8,400 for the buyers. Narrow margin, so we're not likely to see an even lower price point, but it's pretty obvious that this is the new normal and that prices towards 10,000 ISK will be the exception rather than being the low end here. So not great news for those producers. Enriched uranium is trying to crawl back though, with a bottom at 8,700. It's back up to 12,500 ISK almost on the chart. 11,800 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. That's a little bit... well, the chart is saying 12,000, but it's already dropping back down a little bit. So I would say for enriched uranium, which is a fuel related PI material, that was a nice little comeback, but we are probably going to settle in the 12,000 ISK range rather than, well, previously we could have easily come out around 15,000 ISK for enriched uranium. So this yet again is less usage of fuel with the moon mining changes, and apparently even the extra refineries now aren't changing that too much. Next up, we've got the integrity response drones. Very same pattern as with the broadcast nodes here. Normally you're paying around 2.5 million ISK for them. Currently sellers are 3 million and buyers are up to 2.9 million as well. So this is still that premium because of all of the extra demand, which is actually climbing a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Next up, we've got the mechanical parts. Again, not good news for the fuel-related PI, still staying at 9,000 ISK, 9,200 for the sellers, 8,700 for the buyers. It's basically the new trade range, and 10,000 ISK will be considered a great price for mechanical parts, unless for some other reason we get more fuel usage. Nuclear reactors, those are doing, oh, that's okay. You know, I was thinking, how about some extra volatility? Well, for the advanced materials related to structures, pretty obvious, we're paying a premium at the moment. Fuel still down, but some of the other ones are showing some nice volatility. Here are the nuclear reactors, and during December and January we had some nice opportunities to buy at like 90,000 ISK. Currently they're selling for 123,000 ISK, buyers up to 120 as well, forced up by the market. So nice little trade that we could have done here over a couple of months for nuclear reactors. The fact that construction blocks is showing some volatility, the strength of consumer electronics means that, well, unfortunately it's in not fuel related PI materials, which I always liked to go for myself because of, well, in theory the constant demand, because of the constant destruction as well, but it's in the other PI materials where I'm seeing some strength, some trade potential and things like that. Robotics managed to get back to 100,000 ISK, but this will actually, I think, turn out to become a high period for robotics. It's already dropping back to 98,000 for the sellers and 93,000 for the buyers. So it feels a little bit strange to have to call 100,000 ISK a sell opportunity for robotics, but that's basically going to be the situation, I'm afraid. Self-harmonizing power cores, pretty obvious jump up with the new refinery potential, a slow trickle down, but it's still 2.4 million for the sellers, 2.3 for the buyers, definitely a premium compared to the normal price. Superconductors here lacking volatility, and unfortunately I'm producing these as well, so the non-fuel related PI materials, it's not across the board that we're seeing strength and potential. Here it's basically flat at 12,000 ISK, 12,200 for the sellers, 11,300 for the buyers, right around its average. Test cultures next, that one is still staying pretty low, but I would say look for 7,500 on the chart for a buy opportunity. 8,400 for the sellers and 8,000 for the buyers. It's unfortunately a little bit too early to call this a great buy opportunity for test cultures. Maybe for the very long term, on the introduction of yet again a new structure, we might get another nice spike, but I would personally have the patience to wait for a real buy opportunity to get as much profit out of that as possible. And finally we have the wetware mainframes, advanced PI material of course. So here again we can see the rise of the price as more moons became available and more refineries needed to be built. We're still around 2.5 million for the sellers, a bit above that, 2.4 for the buyers, a slight premium in the wetware mainframes as well. So that's it for PI. I would say there is some interesting stuff there, and fuel unfortunately is not that great. At the moment I'm producing mostly fuel related PI. My next switch though, I think it would be if for some reason I would move on from the Dell, which is not on the radar at the moment. Next up we've got the Tech 1 chips, which is at 1940. And I think that with the minerals basically under pressure across the board, we won't see anything all too major. With Burn-Jita though, some things might be interesting, especially some of the destroyers. For instance, here is the Apocalypse just slowly trying to get back to a normal average, staying below 140 million ISK, just below that for the sellers, 126 for the buyers. So this is basically this very slow recovery from the arms race event that saw a massive supply increase. Here is the Caracal. I would say the Caracal is showing the effect of the mineral market on the Tech 1 market at the moment. Here managed to get back to 10 million ISK on some nullsec volatility, some actual warfare, and by that I mean some bigger scale warfare with really the big groups making some moves, dropping their own supplies, losing big fleets. That's when we see this nice increase in price. But it's already back towards 9 million ISK, 9.2 for the sellers, 8.8 for the buyers. I would say that this decrease is in line with the mineral price decrease. The catalyst, of course, it is Burn-Jita, so we've got a massive volume increase and then we've got the price going up. Let's say that we started at 1.25 million, we're currently selling at 2.8 million ISK for a catalyst. So I would say this was probably a period of preparation for Burn-Jita. They needed probably tens of thousands, maybe even more than that, in destroyers if they want to successfully gank Jita for a certain amount of time. And we can already see some reds here in local that went up to 1,000 people almost. So this was obviously a preparation period for that. Turns out that I was right, that a Burn-Jita was in the works, and yet again during the event itself, there's so much interest, so many people all of a sudden also want in on the game that you can now sell your catalyst for 2.8 million, which is a very nice premium. So if during this period you would have actually invested in the blueprint, you could have gotten, I think, a 10-10 blueprint in the first few months pretty easily. You'd be sitting pretty nicely if you could produce some and bring them here in short order. Of course, bringing them here, that's maybe the tricky part at this point. Next up, we've got the Drake, managed to climb its way back to 50 million. That was not to last, of course, considering the mineral prices, and so we are dropping by almost 5 million now. 47 for the sellers, 43 million for the buyers average. I think we'll be at 45 million pretty soon. The Ferox, nice spike up. I think the Ferox is getting a bit of a nerf, so this one will have a tough time climbing anywhere from here. 46 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. The Hurricane though is showing, in my opinion, the mineral pattern going up in price a little bit around February up to 45 million. Unfortunately, sellers are coming back in at 44 million, 40 million for the buyers. So pretty cheap, yet again, definitely below the average. The Megatron is trying to hold strong at 150 million, which, well, is still below the average before the arms race event, but is still definitely a respectable price at 156 million for the sellers, 145 for the buyers. I'd say that's still probably okay considering current mineral prices. My personal expectations are that this will start to drop though. The Oracle next, holding at around 75 million ISK, bit of a volume increase, so quite a bit of interest in Oracle fleets. 77 million for the sellers and 70 million for the buyers. I would say here again that we'll have to wait a little bit more for this volume to these volumes to get back to normal, and then we'll see the mineral market show through all of this. Which it does in the Raven, back down to 150 million, 157 still for the sellers and 146 for the buyers. So still not bad, but you can clearly see that the pressure is on here. The Retriever went up to 25 million ISK, but is already dropping back down. Will it be able to climb back above 22.5? It does for the sellers, 23 to 24 million for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. So yet again, actually, I'm a little bit surprised that we're not seeing more uniform pressure at the moment. It might be Burn-Jita that is basically stopping people from all too actively coming in and getting out with big volumes. But the Tempest, a little bit of pressure here, not too much. And then the Thrasher, I'm surprised to not see that one spike up, down to 1.1 million ISK, 1.2 for the sellers, 1 million for the buyers. There's quite a few of them on the market though. The Tornado spiked up to 70 million ISK. I personally think that there might have been some purchasing for this Burn Cheetah. Already back down. I guess that they have the Tornado fleet that they want to invest in ready to go. And we've got 62 million for the sellers and 56 million for the buyers, and decent availability now for the Tornado. So it's looking like this one will stabilize below average. The Tristan finally breaking out of that strong period a little bit, so managed to stay well above 500,000 ISK for a while, for almost 2 months here, and is now down to 495 for the sellers and 422,000 ISK for the buyers, getting back in the normal trade range of 400 to 500,000 ISK. Strange, I can't really tell you why this Tristan knew such a strong period. One theory that I could try to put on that is that with the opening up of alpha clones to different races, if you're looking for an early PvE ship, then the Tristan, of course, with its 5 small drones, is quite a unique one and quite a very strong one that might not have its equivalent in Minmatar and in Amarr, for instance. So you might have a lot of players that switched out to a Tristan for those level 1 and level 2 missions. It does make them a lot easier, I think, a lot less time consuming. The Venture is continuing on its average above 200,000, is not much to say here. And then the Vexords, apparently the Tech 1 cruisers, that are showing that increase in price early February, and now they're dropping back to less than 10 million ISK on the lower mineral prices. 9.9 for the sellers and 9 million for the buyers, almost 10% here in margin. That is actually quite a lot and putting some pressure on the price. Next up, let's take a look at the Tech 2 ships at 2635. There we go. Let's see if any of them are showing any movements, and here at the moment the Ares is staying pretty flat below 30 million ISK, 29.7 for the sellers, 27 for the buyers. So here yet again, I can't really say which way we are going. It is possible that this is actually a low period for the Ares and that this is a buy opportunity, or if like me you believe that the extra supplies from moon mining are going to eventually mean cheaper production for all of these craft as well, then this could actually be just a wait and see approach to see as supply comes in, maybe 25 million or something like that for a Tech 2 frigate might end up being the normal range in the future. So it's still between those two. I would say the chance that will go up substantially in average price is definitely pretty low, considering the extra supplies that are being made available at the moment. But it's between, is this it, or do we go another leg down? Like here we went to 35 million, a leg down to 30 million. Is there a second leg down? That's, I would say, the question. The Cerberus though, the cruisers are pretty damn volatile, back up to 280 million ISK. That's an indication that maybe, nope, this could actually be the new bottom price range. 271 for the sellers, 255 for the buyers. Now the Cerberus is an extremely popular ship, both in nullsec and in my opinion in highsec as well, because it's a great PvE ship, incredibly capable. So as a result there's just a lot of demand for that, and maybe just not the volumes, because if you look here there's maybe 30 to 40 of them available on the market. Might just not be there for everybody to enjoy the Cerberus, so we're obviously showing some volatility and paying a pretty big premium on that one. The frigates, I would say, are the indication for the longer term, and here the Claw, for instance, is also staying substantially below 30 million and not showing too much signs of lack of supply or of volatility to want to go back up sharply all of a sudden. 28 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Now if you know that, let's say, a big nullsec group is gonna make a move at some point, then sure, I would try to buy at this point. But if you don't know any of that, I would still look for potentially that second leg down. The Crow next, also going below 30 million. Look at that, 29,998,000 is, but it's below 30 million for the first seller and 27 million for the buyer. A bit of lack of demand here, which is quite surprising, but showing another frigate that is actually usually commanding a bit of a premium compared to the others, that now also went below 30 million. The Crusader is actually working its way back up a little bit, but still staying below 30 million ISK, so 29.9 for the sellers and 24.5 for the buyers. This is what sometimes, to me, gives me a small indication that maybe a 25 million price range is not completely crazy. The Heretic is an interdictor, also very popular, lacking in supplies and volumes from time to time, so it does show some volatility, but for the first time in quite a while we are below 70 million ISK on average, 72 for the sellers, 64 million for the buyers. The Hound is, let's see here, trying to climb back to 30 million, but you obviously, in my opinion, seeing that the climb up, the price doesn't manage to really break out as it could before, because supplies are ready to come in and try to take advantage of that 30 million price range for the Hound, but yet 40 of them here, 28 of them coming here. So I would say that it's looking like suppliers are potentially considering 30 million to be a pretty good price even for those frigates. So 27 million for the buyers here. So try and get back down, that must be on fresh supplies, people willing to sell them at 30 million. Next up we've got the Ishtar, also at the lowest point in 4 or 5 months here, selling for 243 million, 230 for the buyers. In my opinion, another indication that there is some more down potential. The Manticore slowly going down as well. First data point below 30 million, but for today, so sellers are at 31, buyers are at 28. This one will be an important one. If the Manticore goes below 30 million and stays there for a while, I do think that there is a chance that the others will have to go back pretty close to 25 million or something like that. Nemesis next managed to go down to 25 million, bumping back up, but it's to 28 million, so I'm still okay with that. 28.4 for the sellers, 24.4 for the buyers here. Yeah, look at that. The spike up to 40 million, down to 35, back up to 40, but then down to 30, back up to 35, now down to 25, trying to get back to 30 million. Yeah, I'd say that this could become the actual price range at some point. We'll still have to wait and see, of course. Pontifex pretty stable at 78 million for the sellers, so 76 on average, 72 for the buyers. It's a command destroyer, definitely a smaller market that will need, I would say, a bit more time to get back into the pattern that the frigates with their bigger volumes manage to get to pretty efficiently. The Purifier is showing the exact opposite of the Nemesis, actually bouncing off of 30 million ISK here. 30 million for the sellers, 28 million for the buyers, though the pressure is pretty obviously on, in my opinion. Last 24 hours, half a page here, including 40 of them here. Yep, sellers for frigates at 30 million seem to be plentiful at this point. The Raptor next, same thing, constantly above 30 million, but here now starting to play with prices below 30 million from time to time. Currently selling for 31.6, buyers at 28 million. They want to get that lower, still 77.42. There's quite a bit of demand there. Supply is meeting it, but nothing too crazy. The Saber next dropping a little bit, but selling still for 75 million, 67 for the buyers. Obviously interdictors are still pretty popular. Next up we've got the Stiletto, which again since October was well above 30 million with a spike up to 40 million. Now for the first time in the last 10 days or so we've been below 30 million ISK. 30 million for the sellers, but look at that, 51 here, 34 here and 27 million for the buyers. The Stork finally dropping off as well, staying for 1, 2, 3, 4 months to a massive premium of 90 million ISK, is also breaking that pattern. Now selling for 73 million, someone is coming in at 66 million ISK here for the buyers as well. So here also a command destroyer for the first time is breaking these year low price ranges on the downtrend, and pretty seriously doing so. And then finally we've got the Taranis, which was below 30 million, is working its way slowly towards 25 million. Buyers are at 25.4, sellers at 27, with still 26 here, 25 here. Still some supply for the Taranis as well. So yeah, the Tech 2 market, it's still all about how will things evolve. I would say for moon mining, there are potentially rigs that can up the game even from here. There are still more of them coming online, I would say, every single day. So I personally think that there is still potential pressure for the future of the Tech 2 market, potentially another leg down. I don't think that 30 million is basically the bottom or average price for frigates in the future. Once all of that settles down, then we'll start to see it trickle down to the destroyers as well, showing more stability and finding a trade range. After that, the cruisers, etc. The bigger the ship, of course, the harder it is going to be to find that, because just a little bit of volatility will mean lots of millions in difference. And so I would say it's a good thing that we're checking the frigates here first. And I would say I'm still getting some indications that my theory is correct. Some of them, though, are hesitating quite hard as well. Let's move on to the Tech 3 market next at 35.30. That's pretty good. Let's take a look here at the destroyers, and the Confessor is basically landing at around 40 million, is constantly decreasing its volatility in the last few months. I was thinking when the Confessor did those nice little jumps from 40 to 60 million for several months consecutively, you know, maybe we could start to look into the Tech 3 market for some active trading. But yeah, with 89 here, 100 here, 124 here, all of that supply, the oversupply specter was constantly looming, and I think that it is starting to really stabilize the Tech 3 market. Here for the Confessor, it definitely did so, and going towards 40 million on average, 41 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers, much narrower margin than before as well. So basically stable at around this price range. The Hecate coming under pressure as well here on bigger volumes, heading towards 40 million. So here again, we've got 49, 114, another 10, another 38, another 18, coming in at 49.5 million, and then we get 41 million for the buyers. But all of this supply, I fear, is going to keep spikes from having the potential of going 10, 15 million in the near future. The Jackdaw next, also landing at, well, probably around 40 million as well. 44 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. But just look at the availability here. It's definitely pretty damn good. And it's not like it's shooting up all too quickly. 44 million, 46 million, 48 million, 49 million, 50 million, and then it's the full front page over around 6 million ISK. You could go much more quickly, in my opinion, with decent volumes on almost every sell order as well. And then finally we've got this Vapel showing the exact same pattern, landing at 40 million, 41 for the sellers with 246 here that are going to stabilize things yet again at 37 million for the buyers. So does that mean that this will last forever, and that we have to be even more patient so that the oversupply can actually push the prices even lower? No, you might actually be able to make some good purchases on these low points that were apparently forming here, but you'll probably need nullsec activity to actually turn a decent profit on a trade like that. And then of course we know that the Jackdaw is massively used by the Imperium, so here we're a bit below average on that. Buy orders are coming in at 40 million. That might actually be okay to buy a couple Jackdaws at around 40 million ISK, but know of course as well that at the start of the year they were going for less than 30 million ISK. So it's definitely a little bit of a gamble if you want to make the investments at this point. For the cruisers, more stability here in the Legion, selling for 139 million ISK with 120 here at 140. Well, it's actually almost 200 of them, more than 200 of them here at 140 million ISK. It's going to keep the price pretty stable, 130 for the sellers. The Loki, yeah, still bouncing around that 200 million mark, the big winner of the CCP intervention, latest intervention in the Tech 3 ships with their entire redesigns, but being the most expensive one, I fear like it is also potentially the one that will be oversupplied first and come under pretty big pressure. If you get 500 of them being sold at 200 million ISK here, that is of course going to take a while for the market to absorb something like that. But the Loki is selling for 199 million ISK, buyers at 184, obviously the most expensive Tech 3 ship at the moment, and also the one that does show a decent amount of volatility. Next up here we get a Proteus. Again, that is the stability that I was talking about. 139 for the sellers. We get another 300 of them here at 1/4. That's gonna block any real spikes. And then we get 124.5 for the buyers. And then for the Tengu, we've got a little bit of a spike, but we're right back to normal. So I basically think that this is more of an anomaly, an anomalous data point that's causing this. Because if you bring in 600 Tengus at 150, you're obviously going to start the competition below this price point from now on, which is going to mean a stable price chart comparable to what we've had in the last few months here. So I'd say that this is more of an anomalous data point than anything else. And for the extra materials this week, I chose a couple that are just of general interest, but that I don't check often enough. So it's going to be the Gecko and the Macharial at 40.30. Let's give myself just a few more seconds, but the Gecko is like an investment of mine, so it's definitely a personal interest. I bought around 80 million. I bought a couple of them. It's either 4 or 8, I'm not really sure. And it was a nice little spike here up to 120 million ISK. We are settling down, but for the Gecko, you know, it's something to remind yourself of. It's a unique item that cannot be produced just infinitely within the game, and that does mean that generally it keeps getting more and more expensive until CCP decides, well, it's time for some more geckos as part of an event reward, as a gift, something like that, and then it crashes the price back down. But a couple months ago we had some nice opportunities to buy these at 80 million ISK. They're still selling for 96 million, so you get some profit right there. Buyers are coming in at 90 million ISK, and then it's always, you know, do I take the gamble of jumping in at this point, because we did just go down from 120 down to 90 million for the buyers basically, or do you just skip it? But it's always the year-over-year charts are continuously very promising at the moment for the Gecko. The gamble that you're taking is that CCP doesn't bring online too much new supply for this. Then it's limited, and then you've got this constant premium. So this 1 year chart does come back very, very often, and then sometimes you crash back down substantially as well. But the Gecko at the moment selling for almost 100 million ISK here. Not sure what my horizon is. I'm actually seeing that investment, I would say, for the very long term, as a bit of a store of some of the ISK that I've got. So I'm not really looking to sell at a certain price range, but what I'm a bit surprised by here is this volatility. So we've got 80 million mid-November, less than that even, and here we went up to 120 million half of January. Volumes wise still okay, 500 of them being traded a day. I'd say that gives you an opportunity to unload like a dozen of them if you want to, and then here back down. But obviously the uptrend of over the 1 year basis here is pretty damn consistent, and is definitely pretty nice as an investment. And then the other item is the Macharial, because it's such an important doctrine in nullsec that's actually getting nerfed. So I was a little bit curious to see exactly what was happening with that one. So what first thing to notice is here in June you've got this big spike in volumes and the uptick from 350 million ISK to more than 500 million ISK. This was a CCP intervention where they tried to make the faction battleships more expensive in materials to produce, so that they wouldn't become basically the only option in nullsec. It worked a little bit for the Macharial, but even at 500 million ISK it remained the go-to ship for big battleship fleets, and it went up to 600 million, then slowly back down, back up to 600 million. But here now this crash actually broke 500 million ISK, and so this is basically the price range that is tied to production costs at the moment. 528 for the sellers, 492 for the buyers. And this is maybe a lesson that we need to learn as well from EVE Talk. It's not always easy to exactly find some steady patterns in the market in EVE. It is of course completely a player-driven market, but what I find very interesting is that the Macharial has been the meta dominating ship for a few years, I would say at this point, in nullsec, and that the price moves for the Macharial are all due to CCP. And so this potentially might give us an opportunity to, in the future, maybe if the nerfs become big enough, the Macharial will be eclipsed by another type of ship. You know, we've got a big buff for the Munin, for instance, that could become interesting. Who knows what nullsec will come up with next as their main doctrine? Then that might be a ship to keep an eye out for, because of potential CCP interventions. If they make it more expensive, for instance, look at that profit, 350 million to 500 million for something that is being used hugely, that you'll be able to unload in pretty big numbers as well. Very good. Of course, when the nerf bat swings, eventually it usually does. You've got the exact opposite, of course. You've got 600 million dropping down to 500 million in a matter of a week as well. So I find this very interesting. It's not something that I do all too often, but the in-meta ships potentially are very interesting as well if you're looking to trade in EVE Online, especially when you expect CCP to move around them. That's when the short-term profits can be really, really huge. And other than that, guys, that's gonna be it for this week. Enjoy Burn Jita, so be a little bit careful with what you're moving to and from Jita at the moment. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.